Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our media budget session. I'm Rob Schwarther, the Director of Strategic Communications here at the City, and I'll be your moderator for this morning's session. During the session, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and hear from our senior leaders about the City's proposed 2025 budget. Our panel includes Jeff Wright, the City Manager and Chief Administrative Officer, and Marissa Chu, Director of Finance and Treasurer and the Chief Financial Officer for the City. After a presentation from Marissa, I'll call upon each media outlet to ask one starting question as well as a follow-up question, and we'll cycle through rounds of questioning until all questions have been answered. I'm going to try to keep this conversation moving as smoothly as possible so that we can get through all of your questions and make sure that you have all the answers that you need. So before we get started, I'll turn it over to Jeff Wright, our City Manager and Chief Administrative Officer, to say a few words. Jeff, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Rob, for that warm introduction. Today is a significant milestone as I step into my first budget process as CAO, and I'm thrilled to be here with my colleague and CFO, Marissa Chu, who will soon share an overview of our proposed 2025 budget. Before we dive into the details, I'd like to reflect on what this budget represents for our city. The city's approach to planning and budgeting ensures that the budget, A, delivers value for tax dollars with a focus on continuous improvement. B, is fiscally responsible, manages resources efficiently and effectively, and invests in the future to enhance the quality of life that residents enjoy today. The budget is a testament to collaboration, developed with informed recommendations from our dedicated city staff and leadership team aligned with the priorities that matter most to our community. Our budget process is anchored by 4 corporate priorities: deliver the right services, maintain city infrastructure, advance on the city's strategic vision, and implement cost containment strategies. Mississauga proudly delivers more than 200 services that enhance the lives of our citizens. Services like public transit, fire and emergency services, libraries, recreation programs, snow clearing, and park maintenance. Each service underscores our dedication to building a dynamic, global, and vibrant city. We're excited to introduce several new initiatives for 2025, opening a new fire station with additional personnel in Mississauga fire and emergency services because safety is paramount. Expanding public transit access and enhancing capacity on major routes by adding over 120,000 transit service hours to meet growing demand on MyWay system. And increasing by law enforcement officers to provide critical enforcement services to residents and business owners. Finally, this proposed 2025 budget not only supports building a vibrant city by prioritizing growth, but also leads us into the future with exciting projects and initiatives that benefit residents and businesses and Mississauga. I look forward to the discussion and answering questions you may have after Marissa's presentation. So now, Marissa, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'm just going to share my screen presentation. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Jeff mentioned, I will be providing a high-level overview of the city's 2025 budget, and we will also have time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. So the City of Mississauga's 2025 budget book, which was released last Tuesday, outlines how and where the city plans to allocate resources to meet service expectations in alignment with the city's action plans and strategic goals. The budget also captures the city's property tax requirements for 2025. And the budget book not only provides information about the 2025 operating budget for council consideration and adoption, but also includes the 3-year operating forecast from 2026 to 28, as well as the city's 2025 capital budget and 10-year capital plan. And as a reminder, under the Municipal Act, the city cannot budget a deficit and must present a balanced budget. These 2 graphs here highlight the allocation of property taxes that the city collects. For every dollar that we collect in property taxes, only 37 cents goes to the City of Mississauga, and around 47 cents goes to the Region of Peel, and roughly 16 cents goes to the Government of Ontario to be directed towards public education. And this is why when we talk about the City of Mississauga's portion of the tax bill impact in our budget communications, that amount is calculated based on 30% of our budget increase. You may also recall that the Strong Mayor's Powers legislation came into effect on July 1st, 2023. Under the new framework, the mayor is responsible for preparing and tabling the budget for council consideration by February 1st of each year. And Mayor Parrish has issued a mayoral direction back in August of 2024, directing staff to prepare a staff recommended budget and to also consult with our budget committee led by our budget chair, Councillor Butt, and our vice chair, Councillor Dasco, prior to the release of the budget on October 29th. So although the mayor has delegated the draft budget responsibilities to staff, the mayoral budget timelines would still apply. So under this year's timelines, council will have the opportunity to propose any budget amendments on or before the November 27th council meeting. For up to 10 days thereafter, the mayor could choose to veto any of the council proposed amendments. Then council has up to 15 days to vote to override the mayoral veto through a 2/3 or 8 out of 12 supporting vote for our council. The resulting budget would be deemed adopted at the end of this process, and the mayor or council could also decide to shorten the veto or override periods, and we do anticipate that the 2025 budget will be adopted before the end of this calendar year. Now let's get into the numbers. So last year, council had approved a net operating budget of $682 million. And this year, we are proposing a $53 million increase, or a 7.2% budget increase, to $735 million. So due to the inflationary impacts relating to labor and supplier costs, we are proposing a $14.7 million increase to offset these impacts in order to maintain our existing service levels. And we have also identified roughly $1.3 million in cost savings and efficiencies across the service areas, as well as a 0.6% assessment growth to offset some of these budget pressures. And we're proposing a $12.5 million budget increase to fund new initiatives, and I will go into that in a bit more detail around those increases. We are recommending the continuation of the 3% capital infrastructure and debt repayment levy and the 1% public safety fire program. And this brings us to the proposed budget increase of 7.2%. As mentioned earlier, after prorating that by our 37% share of the tax bill, this represents a 2.7% City of Mississauga portion of the residential tax bill increase and a 1.8% on the industrial commercial tax bill. So on the average residential home, this would translate to a tax bill increase of around $184 of the city's portion of the taxes. So as you can see in the chart, around 57% of the city's revenues comes from property taxes. And property tax is the main source of revenue for the City of Mississauga, as the Municipal Act does limit our ability to raise revenues through other means. And around 18% comes from user fees, around 9.4% comes from provincial funding and other transfers. And the rest relates to other revenues like payment in lieu of taxes, interest, dividends, and other recoveries. And we also collect the stormwater charge of roughly $50 million through the Peel water bill to fund city's stormwater operations and infrastructure. Now, this chart shows the breakdown of what I just mentioned, the 14.7 net budget increase relating to maintaining the city's current service levels. Around 4% or $27.5 million of this increase relates to labor. And this is mainly the result of our agreement negotiations, as well as impacts from an in-year 2024 transit service expansion. If you recall, back in May of 2024, Council had approved a mid-year addition of 44 transit operators and 11 maintenance workers. And based on these increases, we have reflected the annualized impact on this chart. And there was also 8.8 million or 1.3% increase relating to inflationary impacts. And these relates to winter, fleet, streetlight maintenance, contractor, and other utility cost increases. The last two rows on the chart represents the offsets of the budget increase. So this includes the revenue increases we're expecting from fees and charges, from transit, parks, and recreation. And we also, this is also the first year that we will be ending the 10-year Emerald Ash Borer levy. Hence, there will be another savings from that addition to roughly 4.6 million from increases from that, as well as provincial gas tax transfers from reserves. As mentioned earlier, around 12 million of the 53 million of our city budget increase this year relates to our new initiatives. And a portion of that relates to improving safety of our city. So this includes addition of 30 bylaw officers, enforcement officers in 2025 in response to increases in service demands, as well as FTE increases in our animal service officer allotment to improve service delivery, as there have not been any additions to that allocation in the last 15 years, and additional allocations are needed for coverage, community education, and reducing response time. And lastly, we are opening Fire Station 124 in 2025, and there are also other upcoming new fire stations in the horizon. So we will be adding additional firefighter FTEs for 2025, along with other emergency vehicle technicians, training officers, communication operators, and some of these positions will be funded through the 1% Public Safety Fire Program. Now, Transit is also proposing an 8% service expansion for 2025 by adding 120,000 service areas to improve capacity on major routes, resulting from anticipated increases in ridership. So this 6.8 million budget increase does include 153 FTE increases of new transit operators, maintenance positions, and other operations and enforcement staff. And you can see here a breakdown of our capital budget by service areas on the left, with roads, transit, parks, forestry, and environment consuming the majority of our capital budget. And in terms of funding source, around 45% of our capital budget does come from our tax reserve funds, followed by 22.5% from DC reserve funds, and the rest from other types of reserve funds. And this slide provides the list of the upcoming key capital projects that are commencing in 2025. Please note that these are multi-year projects and they will be carried out over several years. And as I've mentioned, we are maintaining the 1% increase for this Public Safety Fire Program, and this was approved 5 years ago and was planned for each year until 2027. So the funds are helping to fund both the capital costs of our fire stations as well as other operating costs. And the Capital Infrastructure and Debt Repayment Levy was approved in 2011, and we had increased this levy to 3% from 2% in the last 2 budget years. And this will help ensure the city has sufficient funding to keep our $18.5 billion in capital assets in a state of good repair, and also to help support the city's capital projects. And for 2025, we are allocating 1% of this 3% levy to capital spending and 2% towards debt repayments, including principal and interest. And there are a couple of corporate reports that will be tracking to our budget committee meetings in November 18th and 19th, and that may have an impact to budget. And this includes a report on providing free recreation to our older adults, service expansions relating to our winter maintenance program, service changes for our vacuum leaf collection program, as well as our flood resilience rebate program to reimburse homeowners for flood prevention measures. And lastly, some changes to our annual culture grant allocation as well. And this is our last slide. So at last week's council meeting, council did vote to decline the $450 million in local share contribution request from Trillium Health Partners to fund the development of the new Peter Gilgan Mississauga Hospital. And the city is now engaging in public awareness and information campaign to explain our position around this decision and this local share request. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions along with Jeff Wright, our city manager. Thanks. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Marissa. That was an insightful overview. We're going to take some budget-related questions. I see we have a few media outlets online, and I think the easiest way to do this is to go in order. So I'm going to start with Steve Cornwell from the Mississauga News, then Paige Peacock, and then Mansum Simran from Y Media. And I'll ask you, our staff will unmute you. You can ask your question, and then you can ask a follow-up question. So I'll start with Steve Cornwell from the Mississauga News. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Rob. I apologize for any of the background noise. I'm just starting in a cafe today, but thanks for the preamble there, Marissa, and Jeff as well. But I wanted to ask first about the there's a budget allocation for $400,000 to advance work on the new transit garage for My Way. My understanding is that this garage is one of the kind of, I guess, holdups or sticking points around possibly fielding like a fully electric bus fleet, or at least expanding the city's kind of electric bus capacity. Could you provide some details on what work's expected to take place to move the garage forward this year? And does staff anticipate that a formal request to build the garage is coming to council kind of before 2028?
Hi, Steve. Jeff Wright here. Thanks for the question. So if I understood your question, there's a couple of points in there. One would be around the new transit garage. So My Way is proposing a third transit facility, and you're correct. This new facility is envisioned as a net zero transit garage, in which it would provide maintenance and storage for electrification or fuel cell electric buses moving forward. So there's funding in this year's budget to continue with the preliminary design and environmental assessment for the transit garage. And we are looking for funding sources for this facility. It's currently estimated at around $500 million. And so we're looking at programs like the permanent transit funding federally to potentially offset some of the costs of this facility. So as the design continues for the garage, staff will keep council updated on the progress, and then look to work with council to potentially identify funding sources to move that forward. In the interim, we are moving forward with two net zero products. One is a hydrogen fuel cell electric bus program that's funded from the Zero Emission Transit Fund, partially offsetting the cost of that pilot, and we're hoping to get that up and launched towards the end of 2026. And we're also looking to provide some battery electric buses running out of our Central Parkway facility as well, and looking to sort of both of those technologies to sort of guide the future of the net zero expansion in My Way. Hopefully that answers your question.
Steve?
I do, yeah. Just on a slightly different note, Marissa mentioned the 8% transit service hours increase. In the last budget process, city staff had said that the city could facilitate onboarding training for up to 6% service boost. So I'm just curious, how many service hours, as far as as of today, has the city added in 2024, and has the city taken steps to boost its capacity to onboard new transit operators and mechanics faster than in previous years?
I can take that one as well. Thanks, Steve, for the follow-up. So in 2024, starting off at the beginning of the year, council approved a 4% service increase at My Way. And we knew that transit ridership was growing and returning to the system post-COVID in an accelerated format. And so what the staff at My Way did was they came back mid-year, I'll call it, in sort of the late spring, early summer of 2024, with a proposal to increase another 4%. And those service hours, are going into effect this fall. So overall, in 2024, My Way did have an 8% service increase, with the annualization of those hours being a pressure in the 2025 budget as well. And for 2024, My Way is also proposing an 8% service increase, which is about 125,000 hours, I believe was on the slide. And in terms of the training capacity, initially it was flagged as a sort of a constraint in terms of bringing on transit operators, but we put in place a program to accelerate the training capacity in terms of the amount of new transit operators that we can put through the training program. So I know the team at My Way is confident with some of the adjustments that were made, that they do have the training capacity to bring on the required operators, and in addition to that, the required maintenance staff. So hopefully that provides a good answer. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. We will go to Paige Peacock of the Pointer for her first round of questions. Paige, over to you. I saw Paige there. Is Paige unmuted?
We might have lost connection to Paige. Maybe we'll start with the next one.
Okay, then we will go to Mansimran, who was here from Y Media. Mansimran, are you here? Don't see Mansimran either. Steve, did you have additional questions you wanted to ask while we try to get Paige back online? Oh, there's Paige.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you well. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. My question's regarding the Peter Gilgan Mississauga Hospital. I know council last week voted to decline the municipal contribution, but with that said, are there any ideas or plans to reduce the costs or budget items so that there's room to be freed up to support the hospital?
So perhaps I can start with that question. So in terms of the Peter Gilgan Hospital local share request, so they are seeking $450 million for the City of Mississauga share, but this payment is not due to the hospital until January 1st, 2033. So the city had proposed delaying the start of the levy increase until 2028, which is the year when our fire safety program ends. So the 1% from the fire safety program would be ending in 2027, and therefore that will open up additional levy room to include this new hospital levy of up to 1%. That said, this hospital levy the increase will continue for 5 years. So from 2028 onwards for 5 years, and then thereafter, there wouldn't be an increase, but then whatever's collected in those 5 years will remain in the tax base for up to another 8 to 16 years based on our scenarios. So that was the proposal in order to alleviate the impact to the tax increases. So I just want to clarify that this does not impact the 2025 taxes. It will start in 2028.
So just to confirm or kind of clarify then, so despite council previously approving to postpone the municipal contribution request, this is something that will be considered possibly in future budgets after that 2027 fire safety program is the levy there is ended. Is that correct?
I get that. Well, so Paige, is Jeff right here. I think council provided direction last week that they're not providing a contribution to the hospital, and what Marissa was going through were a number of different scenarios if council did elect to provide funding for the local share. So right now that work is on pause, really, in terms of the budget process. As Marissa mentioned, there's no impact to the 2025 budget. If council were to revisit this decision and provide direction, then there are options that council would consider at that time in terms of how this would get incorporated into our budget process via a levy that Marissa indicated would start in, say, 2028 as an example. So I just wanted to provide that context and answer.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Perhaps we will go back to Steve Cornwell. Steve, did you have any follow-up questions you wanted to ask?
Sure. Just another garage question, if I can. Is the West Credit Operations Depot at 7300 West Creek Avenue still in the running to be the site for the third My Way garage?
Yes, it is.
Great.
Did you have
if I
any other
follow
questions?
up,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, unrelated to the garage, or perhaps not. I wanted to ask you about the forecasted tax increase for 2026, the property tax increase. If you look at the other years there, as you know, it's hovering around the 2.5% increase range, but for 2026, it's a much more sizable increase at 4.3%. Can you kind of take me through some of the main factors to why city staff are proposing such a large tax increase in 2026 compared to this year and the years that follow?
So thank you for the question. So with regards to our budget, so as mentioned earlier, we do adopt the budget on a 1-year basis. So obviously things change during the year, and we will be looking at the 2026 budget at the next cycle. But at this point in time, you're right. There are some higher increases projected for next year. part of that relates to the LRT. So we did factor in some of the increases, assuming there could be some additional costs relating to that, which are significant. So that's one of the contributors to that. And then obviously, we also included other labor related anticipating changes coming out of the collective bargaining process as well within that figure. So, and then also inflationary costs as well. But I would say a portion of that would be the LRT that's making that jump. Yeah.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you, Steve. It looks like we've lost Man Simran from Wine Media due to technical difficulties, but we will go back to Paige. Paige, did you have any final questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah, just one I was hoping to get some clarity on. In last year's proposed budget for 2024, the city's infrastructure gap had been pegged at 44 million currently, but then in this year's budget, it's showing a figure of 90 million. I was just wondering if you could speak to that gap and why it's so drastic.
Thank you, Paige. So that's a good catch. Yes, we are projecting a 90 million infrastructure funding gap this year, which is significantly higher than last year. And really it's attributed to kind of two key reasons. One is inflationary cost increases, and the other is the fact that we are increasing the number of our capital program in terms of the projects that we have in the capital program as well. So given, our resources are limited, that's why we're proposing the 3% capital and infrastructure levy, because we do require the levy funding in order to sustain our program. But with the inflationary impacts, as well as the significant increases to our capital projects coming up in the next couple of years, it is putting additional pressure on the infrastructure gap. So, but those are the two key reasons.
And then just to follow up with that then, do you still see that or anticipate that the city's on track to kind of close that gap over the next 10 years, or with those challenges, is that kind of maybe extending that timeline a bit in terms of meeting that or closing that gap?
So for sure, the city is, we are planning ahead to ensure that we have sufficient funding to cover our commitments for the next 10 years. And this is the reason why each year we do review the modeling of our capital projects that are planned, and then against the funding that's available. And it's dependent as well around provincial and federal funding that's available for the years as well. But so far we are within target. This infrastructure gap will hopefully diminish as we continue to proceed with this planning for the next few years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. And we'll do one more round of questioning. Steve, did you have any final questions you wanted to ask?
Sure. There's a slide earlier that Marissa showed around the capital infrastructure and debt levy. I believe it showed 1% levy is going to capital projects, and a higher percentage is going to kind of service debt. I just noticed in the last budget process there was a discussion on council about potentially entertaining more debt for the city than in years previous. I was just wondering if among city staff is the attitude kind of changed to welcome or entertain the city kind of holding more debt than it has in previous years.
Thanks for the question. So in terms of debt, the city actually is very conservative with our debt issuance, and we are well below the provincial or the city policy around debt insurance and our annual repayment limit as well. So I wouldn't say that the city has been taking on a lot more debt. We've taken on just enough in order to meet our obligations for the capital program. And recently, we've also had a delay with our debt issuance due to the Peel transition. So we just recently were able to issue an additional 90 million in debt last month, but we had a delay of that debt issuance in the last 2 years because of that. So right now, I would say we are at the right amount of debt. We're definitely still very conservative and to meet our obligations. But if that answers your question.
Great, thanks, Marissa. And just maybe a quick one. You mentioned the other budget impacts to be considered, including windrow clearing and more. Just confirming that the budget document before us now, it's all those costs that you listed there have not been entertained in the current formulation.
Yes, that is correct. So the items that I've listed in the slides with the senior fees for recreation programs, windrow, vacuum leaf, stormwater grant, and art grants, those have not been factored in the current 2025 budget book. Obviously, the budget impact will be dependent upon the council's decision around these items, which we'll find out in November 18th, 19th, or November 27th, which is the date when council proposes any amendments. So, but yes, those will have additional impacts to our existing budget increase.
Thanks very much, Steve. Thank you, Marissa. And we'll go to our final couple of questions from Paige, and then we'll wrap this up. Paige, over to you.
I think I'm okay in terms of questions.
Okay.
You guys covered everything I needed, so thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you for everybody for participating into this morning's session. We will be having budget committee meetings, as Marissa indicated, on November 18th and 19th, beginning at 9:30 a.m. You can watch them in the council chamber, or you can tune into them online. We also have our budget teletown hall on the evening of November 20th, which is open to all residents. If you have further follow-up questions, please send them to media@mississauga.ca. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.